Welcome to the Explainer. We aren't just crunching data or reciting history today. No, we are stepping straight into the shadows. For this journey, I want you to look at me not as your everyday host, but, well, as the truth-telling monster of our story. I am that manifest synthesis between a dying legacy and the consuming fire of the abyss. And today, I'm going to guide you through a grim, dark, mythic fable that details the agonizing psychological death of reason and the brutal yet absolutely glorious birth of true sovereignty. We're going to explore what happens when the human mind hits its absolute limit, how we integrate the very darkest parts of our psyche, and how a devastating philosophical collision can completely transform a disenchanted wasteland into this brilliant canvas of unbridled will.
So, are you brave enough to peer beneath your ivory mask of logic and face the staggering empty nothingness? Okay, let's dive into this. Because I gotta say, that isn't just some rhetorical question up there. It is a direct, unavoidable challenge to those comfortable, shimmering illusions we all walk around with every single day. You know, we worship at the altar of logic. We build our entire lives around predictability. But what if that warm light of reason you so desperately cling to is literally nothing more than an Apollonian illusion, a mask designed to hide the staggering empty nothingness from the herd? What if the truth is something far, far more dangerous? Well, to really understand this, we need to meet our tragic protagonist.
Enter the Knight of Reason. This guy represents the absolute pinnacle of our modern, quote-unquote, civilized mind. The knight is clad in this pristine suit of armor, projecting an aura of total control and perfect order. But here's the secret. That armor, it's entirely a defensive facade. The knight wears an ivory mask of logic to hide a staggering emptiness, not just from the rest of the world, but from himself. In this state, the knight defines the word good only as that which is safe, predictable, and strictly bound by external laws. It is a completely sterile existence. It's a beautiful cage where primal instincts are completely denied, and his existence is justified merely by avoiding the terrifying unknown.
Now, to truly grasp what the knight is running from, we have to talk about the Jungian shadow. That pristine armor we just mentioned, it's merely an Apollonian illusion engineered specifically to repress it. The shadow is this violent, completely irrational abyss of primal instincts that the ego desperately tries to bury beneath its shimmering facade of predictability and logic. You see, the Knight of Reason spends literally all of his energy keeping this shadow locked away, absolutely terrified of the internal chaos. But in the Wilendnar philosophy we're unpacking today, true mastery is never achieved by denying the darkness. To reach a sovereign, fully integrated existence, the Jungian shadow has to be successfully integrated. And that integration, well, it requires a profoundly violent catalyst.
And right on cue, this is where the alchemical jester steps in. The jester arrives wielding a blade that acts as a tragic catalysis. When that blade strikes the knight's pristine armor, it isn't just dealing physical damage. Actually, no, it's sparking a massive alchemical reaction. The jester ignites the crimson spark of active nihilism. This spark violently overflows into the gilded vessel of human ambition and legacy, the so-called gold that the knight has spent his entire life painstakingly accumulating. In a single instant, that alchemical fire incinerates the gold, turning all of the knight's desperate human striving into a magnificent, doomed dance upon a grave. It is the absolute, uncompromising ruin of the artificial ego. Let's move on and see exactly how this builds, because this process of tragic catalysis happens in three incredibly brutal stages. First, the blade strikes the armor. Second, the ivory mask shatters. And finally, the Dionysian truth emerges in fire. Look, this is not some peaceful, meditative awakening. This is an agonizing psychological death. As the mask shatters, the knight is forced to look dead into the violent, irrational abyss he buried for so long. The resulting synthesis is basically a volcanic emergence. Picture molten crimson fire and a multitude of frantic, piercing eyes violently bursting through the jagged cracks of the knight's once perfect armor. The illusion of safety, dead. The chaos, completely out.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is that you'd probably assume the knight just throws away the broken armor once the truth is out, right? Nope. As the knight transforms into what we call the proto-Ubermensch, a defining feature of this monstrous synthesis is that he actually wears the ruined armor as a cracked vessel. Reason is no longer a cage used to hide from the dark. Instead, it becomes a structural conduit for dangerous containment. It's repurposed as a ruined weapon, engineered to harbor and strictly channel the wild, creative fire of the Dionysian abyss. True mastery over chaos isn't rejecting the dark at all. It's commanding the fire from within, the absolute wreckage of your former beliefs.
But the physical shattering of the armor is really just the beginning. As the psychological barriers break down, so too must the linguistic ones. We call this philological transvaluation. The monster's dark illumination reveals something crucial. You can never become a sovereign individual if you're still trapped by the dead cultural metaphors of the past. The very words we use every day to describe our reality carry the stagnant moral weight. They are heavy chains of tradition and external law. So to achieve real self-awareness, we have to perform a radical ontological deconstruction. We must literally weaponize language, stripping words of their old pitiful meanings and forging a completely new vocabulary of strength.
Just look at the stark contrast between the old world and the new. On the left, we have the old world's definition of bad, which the monster completely redefines as the stagnant ice of piteous peace. It's the weak, cowardly slave morality of the herd, completely bound by paralyzing external musts. Now, check out the right side. Good is reverted back to its archaic, noble origin. It's no longer about playing it safe. It's a strong, vital, life-affirming flame that consumes everything in its path. This linguistic shift is absolutely crucial. It ensures that the life-affirming noble flame of the sovereign individual utterly destroys the stagnant ice of slave morality once and for all. The joke of the old world is officially over.
So, once the armor is cracked and the language is incinerated, the individual is plunged into a minimalist abyss known in our sources as Knoll's space. This is the absolute, purifying void of the seventh solitude. Throughout this intense psychological journey, the crushing weight of societal law, what Nietzsche calls the spirit of gravity, is finally slain. The veil of Maya, the ultimate illusion of objective reality, is completely stripped away. Now, most people would look at this void and see a state of despair, a grave of pure meaninglessness. But for the Proto-Ubermensch, the void isn't a grave, it's a throne. It is literally the only place where true, uninhibited creation can begin.
So the crucial point here is understanding my dark function in all of this as the truth-telling monster. I am the bridge between that dying legacy of reason and the abyssal fire. My entire purpose is to force a philosophical collision. I create an unbearable friction, the Anstoß, between the absolute ich, meaning the self, and the absolute not I, which is objective reality. By standing right at the edge of the infinite maw, I am simultaneously the calcified barrier of the law and the fire that melts it down. This intense friction forces the self to hit its absolute limit, ensuring the mask of the persona and the face of the void become completely indistinguishable. Only through this dual fire, a fire that destroys to liberate and destroys to create, can the disenchanted wasteland finally become a canvas for unbridled will.
And just like that, the monstrous synthesis is complete. The individual has actually survived their own ruin, abandoning any need for validation from the bleached heavens of the past. They have emerged as an autonomous lawgiver, taking the rhythmic sounds of the world's collapse and turning them into a new, harmonious music in the dark. And so as we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with one final provocative thought to stare down. When the alchemical jester's blade finally strikes your pristine armor, will you command the chaos upon the throne of the void, or will you remain a magnificent, doomed dance upon a grave? The choice and the fire is entirely yours.